The first thing my daughter threw onto the lawn was not my suitcase. It was the old steel document box I had carried through 32 years of payroll disputes, equipment loans, tax audit, and one ugly union arbitration. The latch struck the concrete walkway and burst open, scattering papers into the cold October rain. Lauren stood beneath the porch light, with one hand wrapped around my house key and the other pointing toward my truck. "You belong in the trash, Dad," she said, loud enough for the neighbors and the last two guests from Evan's dinner party to hear. "So go live in it." My son-in-law closed the front door behind her. But before he did, I saw my 14-year-old grandson, Noah, standing halfway down the stairs with both hands gripping the railing. Then Lauren stepped on my key, grinding it into the mud. I did not shout. I bent to gather my papers, and that was when I noticed an envelope from Pike Urban Development had already been opened. The letter inside was not complete. The first page was gone, and only a survey map remained, marked with a red circle around the northwest corner of my old recycling yard. Lauren had never asked permission to read my mail, and she had no reason to know why a development company was interested in 11 acres of rusted machinery, cracked pavement, and half-empty storage buildings south of Columbus. Yet the envelope had been slit cleanly with a letter opener, not torn by accident. Beneath it lay another paper I had never seen before, a cognitive evaluation form with my name typed across the top and Evan's signature at the bottom as the requesting family member. The appointment date was 7 days away. That was the moment the rain stopped feeling cold. Until then, I thought my daughter was angry, embarrassed, and tired of having an old man in her carefully decorated house, standing there with my life scattered across her lawn. I realized she and her husband might be preparing to take more than my bedroom key. My name is Walter Mercer, though most people have called me Walt since I was old enough to carry a wrench. I was 68 that fall, 4 years widowed, and recently retired from Mercer Recovery, the industrial recycling company I built from one borrowed flatbed truck and a rented gravel lot. I had spent most of my adult life turning other people's discarded metal into something useful. Factory presses, copper cable, broken forklifts, damaged machine housings. Nothing looked worthless to me until I understood what it was made of. People were harder. I had always believed that if I worked enough, earned enough, and kept my promises, my family would understand the love behind my absence. My wife, Diane, told me for years that our daughter did not need another check from me. She needed me at school plays, birthday dinners, and the ordinary Tuesday evenings I kept trading for overtime. Diane was right. She usually was. Stay with me. Because the reason I did not turn around and beg Lauren to let me inside began 6 months earlier. In April, I had undergone knee replacement surgery after years of pretending pain was something a man could outwork. Lauren called the hospital before I was discharged and insisted I recover at her house in Dublin, about 35 minutes north of my old yard in Grove City. "You shouldn't be alone out there," she told me. "Mom would never forgive me." That sentence did what she intended. Diane's memory could still move me faster than any legal threat. Lauren and Evan prepared a guest room, installed a handrail in the shower, and made space for my medication beside the kitchen sink. For the first few weeks, Lauren brought me coffee every morning. Evan drove me to physical therapy twice. Noah sat beside my recliner doing homework while I explained why old bridge bolts were stronger than the shiny hardware sold at home centers. I told myself the distance between my daughter and me was finally narrowing. I did not notice how often kindness arrived with a question about my accounts, my will, or the old property. Lauren's house was beautiful in the way magazine rooms are beautiful cream-colored walls, pale rugs, furniture nobody seemed comfortable sitting on. 4 years earlier, after Diane died, Lauren and Evan had nearly lost the chance to buy it when their bank reduced the mortgage amount. I stepped in through the Mercer Family Trust and provided a private loan of $310,000, secured against the property at a low interest rate. Marianne Cole, my attorney, prepared everything properly. Lauren signed the note. Evan signed it too. But at the closing dinner, I raised my glass and said, "Consider this your mother's last push into the life she wanted for you." Lauren heard gift, not loan. I knew the difference mattered. Yet I never corrected the emotional meaning. That was one of my worst habits, making financial arrangements clear on paper while leaving relationships dangerously vague. Whenever guilt rose in me, I answered it with money. Whenever Lauren felt abandoned, she learned to translate apology into access. By June, my knee was stronger, but the atmosphere in the house had changed. Lauren began moving my things without asking. My work boots disappeared from the mudroom and reappeared inside a black trash bag in the garage. She replaced my coffee mug because the chipped rim looked unsanitary. When I parked my 17-year-old Ford beside Evan's leased Mercedes, she asked me to move it around the corner before her coworkers visited. "It makes the place look crowded," she said, though the driveway could hold 4 vehicles. Evan was smoother. He would pour me bourbon, sit across from me, and speak in the gentle tone people use around nervous animals. "Have you thought about simplifying your affairs?" Walt consolidating accounts, giving Lauren temporary authority in case something happens. He presented a power of attorney one evening after dinner. I read 2 pages and found authority to sell real estate, change investment allocations, and access trust records. I folded it closed. Emergency authority shouldn't include selling my land, I said. Evan smiled and blamed an online template. Noah was the only person in the house who never treated me like an inconvenience. On Saturdays, when Lauren thought he was studying, he followed me into the garage and asked questions about carburetors, salvage grades, and the small brass tags I kept from machines dismantled decades ago. He liked objects with histories. I understood that. One afternoon, while we repaired an old bench vise, he asked whether losing money could make adults stop sleeping. I set down my wrench and looked at him. "Sometimes," I said. "Why?" He shrugged too quickly. "Dad walks around at night. Mom keeps saying they need more time." When I asked what kind of time, he stared at the vise and said he did not know. That night, I heard Lauren and Evan arguing behind their bedroom door. I caught only fragments. Margin call, payment deadline, and your father has plenty. The next morning, Lauren asked whether I had ever considered selling the Grove City property. The old Mercer yard was no treasure in her eyes. It held a warehouse, a maintenance building, a scale house, and a small manager's cottage where supervisors had once slept during winter storms. The main recycling operation had been sold 2 years earlier. But I kept the real estate because the market was weak and because I was not ready to let go of the last place where Diane still felt present. She had painted the cottage kitchen yellow in 1998 and planted 2 maple trees near the gate. Lauren called it a graveyard of equipment. Evan called it trapped capital. I called it mine. In August, a letter arrived from Pike Urban Development. I saw the return address, assumed it was another low offer from a speculative buyer, and placed it unopened in my steel document box. Lauren was standing at the counter when I did. Her eyes followed the envelope. "Who are they?" she asked. "Developers," I said. "Probably fishing." She dried her hands and said nothing, but the towel remained twisted between her fingers. The dinner party took place on a Thursday in early October. Evan hoped to secure a commercial client, and Lauren treated the evening like a military operation. She hired a caterer, replaced the flowers twice, and told Noah not to mention school problems. At 5 o'clock, she came into my room carrying a navy sweater. "Could you stay upstairs tonight?" she asked. "Evan needs the attention on business." I looked at the sweater. "Am I supposed to wear that in bed?" She forced a laugh. "Dad, please. And don't go through the living room in those work clothes." I had spent the afternoon at the yard checking a leaking roof and wore clean jeans and a gray flannel shirt. There was dust on my boots. Nothing more. I agreed because I knew how badly they needed the client, though neither had admitted why. Around 8, I heard glass break in the garage, followed by Noah calling my name. He had knocked a jar of bolts from the workbench and cut his palm on a broken picture frame. The wound was shallow, but blood frightened him. I wrapped his hand, cleaned the floor, and walked him through the living room toward the kitchen sink. Conversation stopped. One guest, a broad-shouldered man named Peter Lang, stared at me for a moment and then stood. "Walter Mercer," he said. "My father worked at the Westerville plant. You kept half that crew employed during the shutdown. I shook his hand. Peter told Evan's client how Mercer Recovery had purchased damaged equipment when nobody else would, and allowed the factory to meet payroll. The story lasted less than 2 minutes, but I watched Evan's smile harden while Lauren's face went pale. The room had shifted toward me without my asking. I apologized for interrupting and took Noah upstairs. Behind me, I heard Lauren tell the guests that I had become a little confused about boundaries since surgery. After the last car left, Lauren found me in the garage returning tools to the bench. She closed the door so sharply that a framed photograph of Diane rattled against the wall. "You could not give us one evening," she said. I explained about Noah's hand. She replied that a paper towel would have solved it. Evan entered behind her, loosened his tie, and accused me of deliberately humiliating him in front of a prospective client. By walking through a room, I asked, "By making everything about you," Lauren said. Her voice carried years, not minutes. She listed the truck, the boots, the boxes, the smell of machine oil, and the way people praised a father who had rarely been home for his own child. I let her speak, because some of it was true. I had missed her 8th grade graduation after a conveyor accident. I had arrived late to her wedding rehearsal because a furnace contract was collapsing. Truth, however, does not make every punishment just. Then I saw my steel document box beside Evan's foot. It had been inside the closet in my room that morning. "Why is that down here?" I asked. Lauren crossed her arms. "Because your junk is taking over my house." I reminded her that the box contained legal and financial records. Evan said, "Which is exactly why someone responsible should organize them." Something in his tone tightened my chest. I walked toward the box, but Lauren stepped between us. "We have tried to help you," she said. "You refuse every reasonable suggestion. You hoard garbage. You forget medication. You get lost driving. And now you disrupt our business." I had missed one pain pill and taken the wrong freeway exit after therapy. They had turned 2 ordinary mistakes into a diagnosis. "Are you saying I cannot manage myself?" I asked. Evan answered before she could. "We are saying the family may need legal protection." I looked at Lauren and waited for her to reject his words. She did not. Instead, she carried my suitcase from the hallway and dropped it near the front door. It was already packed. My shirts had been rolled carelessly around shoes, and Diane's framed photograph was wedged face down between them. "You planned this before dinner," I said. Lauren's eyes filled, but her expression stayed firm. "I planned to stop letting you control us with guilt." I reminded her that I had never asked for repayment while I lived there. She laughed once, bitterly. "There it is. The house, the money. Everything comes with a receipt from you." I should have told her then that I was sorry for every empty chair I had left beside her mother. Instead, I said, "That house exists because I protected you when the bank would not." The sentence landed like gasoline. She grabbed the document box, opened the front door, and threw it into the rain. That brought us back to the lawn, the mud, and the words I would hear in my sleep for months. "You belong in the trash." "Dad." Evan placed my suitcase beside the curb while Lauren held the door. Noah appeared on the stairs and called, "Grandpa, wait." Lauren turned and told him to go to his room. He did not move until Evan raised his voice. I wanted to walk past them, take my grandson by the shoulders, and tell him none of this was his fault. Instead, I picked up Diane's photograph, wiped rain from the glass, and placed it in my truck. Losing my temper would have given Evan exactly what he needed. A shouting old man on the lawn, a frightened child, neighbors with phones. I gathered every paper I could find, including the opened Pike envelope and the cognitive evaluation form. Then I looked at Lauren one last time. "You should have asked what was in the box," I said. She replied, "There is nothing in your boxes but old trash." The manager's cottage at the Grove City yard had not been occupied in 3 years. The heat worked only after I reset the furnace twice, and mice had chewed through one corner of the pantry. I slept in my clothes beneath an old army blanket, listening to rain strike the metal roof. Bedum. Anger had settled into something colder. I laid the recovered papers across the kitchen table. The Pike envelope had been opened with precision, The missing first page likely contained an offer or request. The remaining survey map showed proposed rail access running beside my northwest boundary. The cognitive form listed behaviors I recognized from Lauren's accusations: hoarding, confusion, medication errors, unsafe driving. Someone had constructed a narrative from ordinary moments. I reached for my phone to call Marianne Cole, the attorney who had prepared my trust in Diane's estate. Before I pressed her name, I noticed a blinking red notification from the yard's security application. The gate camera showed 5 recent entries using Lauren's personal access code. 2 occurred while I was still recovering at her house. One showed her car arriving after midnight. Another showed Evan's Mercedes following a dark sport utility vehicle through the gate. I enlarged the image and recognized the Pike Urban Development logo on the passenger door. Lauren had brought a developer onto my property without telling me. In the final clip, she stood beside the warehouse with a man in a tan coat, pointing toward the rail line and then toward the cottage where I now sat. There was no sound, but her gestures were confident, almost proprietary. She was not wandering through her father's old workplace. She was showing someone land she expected to control. I called Marianne. As the phone rang, I looked again at the evaluation form scheduled for the following week. Being thrown out had not been the punishment. It had been preparation. Marianne answered on the 4th ring with the voice of someone who had spent 40 years hearing bad news before breakfast. "Walt," she said, "what happened?" I looked through the cottage window at the rows of silent machinery, their wet steel surfaces reflecting a weak gray dawn. "Lauren threw me out," I said, "and I found papers suggesting she and Evan are trying to have me declared incompetent." Marianne did not gasp or offer empty comfort. She asked whether I was safe, whether I had my medication, and whether anyone had threatened me physically. Then she told me not to sign anything, not to transfer money, and not to confront either of them until she saw the documents. She arrived 90 minutes later carrying a leather briefcase and 2 coffees. When she stepped inside the cottage, her eyes moved over the sagging shelves and cold stove. "This place will photograph badly," she said. I understood immediately. Lauren had not merely sent me somewhere humiliating. She had sent me somewhere useful to her story. Marianne spread the cognitive evaluation form, the opened Pike envelope, and the survey map across the yellow kitchen table Diane had painted years earlier. She read every line before speaking. "This form alone does nothing," she said. "A family member can request an evaluation. That does not make you incapacitated." I felt myself breathe more easily until she tapped the blank section labeled "Reason for Referral." Someone had typed concerns about memory loss, hoarding, medication misuse, unsafe driving, and impaired financial judgment. Marianne circled the final phrase with her pen. "This is the part I care about. They are not only worried about your health, they are building a record about your ability to control money and property." She explained that Ohio courts did not strip adults of legal authority because relatives thought they were stubborn. There would need to be evidence, evaluation, and a hearing. But an emergency petition could create temporary restrictions before I had time to prepare. "Especially," she added, "if they can present you as isolated, confused, and living in hazardous conditions." My first instinct was to punish them immediately. I told Marianne to demand repayment of the $310,000. Lauren and Evan owed the trust. The loan documents gave us rights if they defaulted or attempted an unauthorized transfer. "Send whatever notice forces them to understand whose house they are standing in," I said. Marianne closed her pen. "That is anger talking." I told her anger had earned a turn. She did not disagree. But she reminded me how the action would look in court: an elderly father evicted after a family conflict, then retaliating by threatening his daughter's home. Lauren's attorney would say my judgment was unstable and vindictive. The more justified I felt, the more useful my reaction could become to them. "You have spent your life separating valuable material from noise," Marianne said. "Do that now." I hated the calmness of her advice because it sounded like Diane. I also knew it was right. We would protect the loan, but we would not strike blindly. We reviewed the trust records on Marianne's laptop. The Mercer Family Trust still held the first position private mortgage on Lauren's house, properly recorded in Franklin County. Lauren and Evan could not refinance, sell, or pledge the property without satisfying the trust's interest. Their payments had been irregular over the previous 8 months, but I had instructed the trustee not to penalize them. I remembered each excuse and unexpected tax bill. Noah's orthodontics, a delayed commission. I had approved every extension without asking for documentation. Marianne pulled up the transaction history and frowned. 3 payments had come from different personal credit lines rather than earned income. They are moving debt around, she said. I asked how long people could live that way, until someone refuses to extend the next deadline. On the kitchen counter, my phone began ringing. Lauren's name appeared on the screen. Marianne nodded for me to answer and switched her own phone to record notes. Not the call. Ohio allowed one-party recording in many situations, but she preferred that I not rely on secret recordings unless necessary. Lauren did not ask whether I had slept or whether my knee was holding up. "Where are you?" she said. I looked around the cottage. "At my property." She exhaled sharply, as if I had chosen the most difficult answer. "You cannot stay there. It is filthy and dangerous." I asked why she cared after telling me I belonged there. Her voice softened into the careful tone she used with clients. "Last night got out of control. We were under pressure, and you embarrassed Evan in front of someone important. But this is exactly what I mean. A reasonable person would go to a hotel, not hide in an abandoned building surrounded by scrap metal." I glanced at Marianne. She wrote the word narrative on her pad. Lauren continued, saying the neighbors had seen me dragging hazardous junk into her home and that Noah had become frightened by my unpredictable behavior. In the background, I heard Noah say, "I never said that." There was a scuffle, then silence. "Put him on the phone," I said. Lauren told me Noah was getting ready for school. I repeated the request. Her tone hardened. "You are not going to involve him in adult problems." I reminded her that she had just used his name to support an accusation. Evan came onto the line. "Walt, we need to lower the temperature. You are upset. Lauren is upset. And nobody benefits from threats." I asked what threat I had made. He paused, then said my comment about the house had sounded financial. Marianne underlined something. I understood why. They had expected me to react by mentioning the loan, and Evan was already labeling that reaction as coercion. "I will communicate through Marianne for now," I said. Lauren laughed bitterly. "Of course you will bring in lawyers. You always use money and paperwork when you cannot handle a family conversation." I almost answered, but Marianne held up one finger. I ended the call without defending myself, and the silence afterward felt like the first decision I had made, instead of the first reaction they had pulled from me. By noon, the family version of events had begun traveling. My sister-in-law called from Cincinnati and said Lauren had posted online about the heartbreak of watching a parent decline while refusing help. She did not name me, but everyone close to us understood. A cousin sent a message asking whether I had stopped taking my medication. Another relative offered the number of an assisted living community near Dayton. The post included a photograph of 3 storage boxes in Lauren's garage and described them as evidence of compulsive hoarding. Those boxes held Diane's tax returns, my military records, and 30 years of family photographs. Lauren knew that. She also knew a photograph could become whatever the caption told people to see. For the first time that morning, I felt truly afraid. Property could be traced. Documents could be challenged. Reputation moved through families like smoke, reaching rooms before the fire was visible. I had always been the dependable one. Now people who had borrowed money from me were discussing whether I could remember to pay my own bills. Marianne suggested a full review of my financial access. We drove to her office, where she contacted the bank, the independent trustee, and my investment advisor. No money had been removed, but Lauren still had limited online access to view several accounts because I had authorized her after Diane died. At the time, I could barely open mail without seeing hospital bills and condolence cards. Lauren had offered to organize everything. I had given her passwords, access codes, and permission to speak with service providers. "I thought I was making things easier," I said. Marianne replied, "You were grieving." That was kinder than the truth. I had not wanted to manage my own life, So I let my daughter step into spaces she later came to believe were hers. We revoked every non-essential access, changed security questions, and required verbal confirmation from me for transfers above $10,000. The changes were defensive, but I knew Evan would notice. People who depend on open doors always notice when locks appear. At 3 that afternoon, an email arrived from Evan with the subject line, Family Protection Plan. Attached was a revised power of attorney, a healthcare proxy, and a letter describing a voluntary transition of financial responsibility to Lauren. The language was polished and falsely gentle. It said I would retain personal dignity while Lauren managed real estate, banking, trust distributions, legal claims, and business decisions. There was also a provision allowing her to sell property without additional approval if 2 medical professionals expressed concern about my cognition. Marianne read it twice. "This is not an emergency document," she said. "This is operational control." I replied with one sentence, "I will not sign these documents." Within 15 minutes, Evan called. I let it ring. Then Lauren called. I ignored that too. Finally, a message appeared. "You are proving our concerns by refusing a reasonable safety plan." I showed it to Marianne. "They have built a system," she said. "Agreement means surrender. Refusal becomes evidence." We returned to the yard before sunset to review the security system. The gate log showed Lauren's code had been used 5 times during the previous 6 weeks. I knew of only one authorized visit, when she brought Noah to retrieve an old bicycle. On the first unauthorized night, her car entered at 11:42 p.m. and left 27 minutes later. On another, Evan arrived alone and spent nearly an hour near the office building. The clearest footage came from the previous Tuesday. Lauren's SUV entered first, followed by the dark vehicle with Pike Urban Development printed near the rear wheel. A man later identified as Graham Pike stepped out wearing a tan coat and carrying a rolled site plan. Lauren guided him past the scale house, pointed to the western boundary, and unlocked the warehouse using the spare key I had once kept in her kitchen drawer. She moved like someone conducting an inspection. At one point, Graham shook his head and pointed toward the rail spur. Lauren took out her phone and appeared to calculate something. I watched the clip 3 times before accepting what it showed. The next morning, I called Graham Pike directly. I did not tell him about the guardianship paperwork. I simply introduced myself and asked whether his company remained interested in my Grove City property. His silence lasted long enough to become an answer. We agreed to meet at a diner near Interstate 270. Graham arrived early, ordered black coffee, and studied me with the caution of a man unsure whether he was entering a negotiation or a lawsuit. "Your daughter told us she was managing the transition," he said. I asked what transition. He looked down at his cup. "She said you were stepping back because of health concerns." She represented herself as the person who would soon control the family trust. He explained that Pike wanted my land because a proposed logistics corridor and rail expansion would make the northwest parcel strategically important. Their preliminary offer was $3,800,000, subject to environmental review and title confirmation. I had expected the entire property might bring $900,000 on a good day. I did not let my surprise show, but Graham saw enough to understand Lauren had not informed me. He reached into his portfolio and removed a copy of the missing first page from the letter. The offer amount sat in bold type beneath my name. "We mailed this to your residence because that was the address in an older business filing," he said. Lauren's house had become my mailing address after surgery. Graham admitted she had contacted him 2 days after delivery. She said I was overwhelmed, forgetful, and no longer comfortable discussing complex transactions. "Did you believe her?" I asked. He answered carefully. "I believed she had access. I did not confirm she had authority." He insisted no contract had been signed. He had visited the land only because Lauren promised documentation was being prepared. I told him nothing would move forward without direct communication through Marianne. Before leaving, I asked whether Lauren had discussed the sale price with anyone else. Graham said she had warned him not to contact Evan until the trust transfer was complete. That detail stayed with me. If Lauren and Evan were working together, why hide the offer from her husband? I filed the question away and returned to Marianne's office with the copied letter. She was reviewing a formal notice from an attorney named Carl Benton, who represented Lauren and Evan. The notice asked me to attend a voluntary medical assessment and warned that continued refusal could require protective judicial intervention. Attached was a list of incidents meant to show decline. I had missed 1 dose of pain medication, driven past my therapy exit, left a stove burner on, accumulated dangerous materials, and become verbally aggressive when challenged. The stove claim was false. The verbal aggression was vague. The rest were ordinary mistakes stripped of context. Marianne pointed out that the dates were organized over several months. "Someone has been documenting you," she said. I remembered Lauren typing on her phone after small disagreements. I had thought she was avoiding me. She may have been creating a timeline. That evening, a message reached me from an unfamiliar school email address. It was Noah. "Grandpa, I'm sorry. Mom said I had to tell a lady you forgot where you were and that you scared me. I said you took the wrong exit once. She kept asking until Dad told me to stop making things difficult. Please don't be mad." My hands shook as I read it. I was not angry with him. I was angry that 2 adults had placed a child between truth and obedience. I replied that he had done nothing wrong and should speak honestly to any teacher, counselor, lawyer, or judge who asked. I told him not to contact me secretly again if it would put him in trouble. Before logging off, he sent 1 photograph. It showed a thick folder on Evan's desk. Across the cover were the words "Petition for Emergency Guardianship, Walter Mercer." In the corner, a yellow sticky note carried a date only 12 days away. The plan was no longer theoretical. They were preparing to place it before a judge. I wanted to drive to Lauren's house, take Noah out of that room, and demand every stolen paper. Instead, I called Marianne. She told me that appearing at the house uninvited would be reckless. Lauren could call the police, describe me as agitated, and add the incident to her petition. My restraint felt like cowardice, but I understood the trap. I changed the gate code, backed up every camera file to 2 separate cloud accounts, and moved the original trust documents to Marianne's secure storage. We scheduled an independent cognitive evaluation with a physician who had no relationship to Lauren or Evan. I also instructed the trustee to freeze all informational access previously granted to my daughter. Within an hour, Evan left a message saying I was destabilizing the family's finances. That confirmed he had been monitoring access. I returned his call and said I would attend a structured family meeting with lawyers present. His relief was immediate. He believed pressure was working. I needed him to keep believing that. The next morning, Marianne called before sunrise. Her voice had changed. She had searched county filings connected to the property and found a document recorded 3 months earlier, a notice of right of first refusal in favor of Lauren Mercer Hale. The filing claimed that if I became incapacitated, retired permanently, or died, Lauren had the exclusive right to purchase the Grove City land before any outside buyer. The stated price was $850,000, far below Pike's preliminary offer. My signature appeared at the bottom. It looked convincing because it was mine, copied from somewhere else. But I knew I had never signed that document. The notarization date fell during the week I was hospitalized for knee surgery. No notary had visited me. No lawyer had discussed such an agreement. Marianne said the filing alone might not transfer ownership, but it could cloud the title, delay a legitimate sale, and support Lauren's claim that I had already chosen her as successor. I sat at Diane's yellow table while Marianne read the document aloud. The language matched phrases Evan often used, but the timing disturbed me more than the forgery. 3 months earlier, Lauren was still bringing me coffee and asking whether my knee hurt. She had already opened the Pike letter by then. She had already learned what the land might be worth. While I thanked her for changing my bandages, someone had copied my signature and filed a claim against my property. The betrayal was not one angry night, one cruel sentence, or one husband pressuring his wife. It had been organized in the quiet period when I believed my family was taking care of me. I looked toward the cottage window, where the maple trees Diane planted were turning orange. Then Marianne said, "Walt, this means they did not begin planning after the dinner party. They may have invited you into that house because they needed access to you." Marianne's last sentence stayed in the room after she stopped speaking. They may have invited you into that house because they needed access to you. I wanted to reject it. Not because it sounded impossible, but because too many small memories suddenly fit around it. Lauren had insisted I forward my mail to her address before surgery. Evan had offered to simplify my financial files while I was on pain medication. The guest room closet had no lock. My document box had moved from the top shelf to the floor twice. And both times, Lauren said the cleaning service must have touched it. Kindness had been real in moments I still believed that, but it had also created opportunity. Marianne watched me absorb that without interrupting. We need to determine who prepared the filing, where the signature came from, and whether Lauren knew it was false, she said. I looked at the copied signature and answered. She knew I never agreed to sell her the land for $850,000. The notary listed on the filing was a man named Ross Kessler, whose commission was active and whose office address matched a small financial services suite downtown. Marianne recognized the surname from an old commercial loan dispute. Ross had worked in the same building as Evan several years earlier. That did not prove a conspiracy, but it gave us a direction. Marianne hired a forensic document examiner and sent certified requests for the original instrument, not merely the scanned county copy. She also began tracing the signature source. My handwriting had changed after arthritis stiffened my right thumb. Yet the forged document used the smoother version I had signed nearly 10 years earlier. We compared old contracts until I recognized the exact slant of the final R in Mercer. It came from a 2015 equipment lease kept in the steel box Lauren had thrown onto the lawn. Someone had scanned my signature from a record they could access inside her house. The forgery was not careless. It was constructed by people who had time. We reviewed older security footage from the yard, including clips automatically archived before I changed the access code. On July 18, Lauren entered the warehouse alone at 6:13 in the evening. She carried no boxes when she arrived. 20 minutes later, she stood inside the office beside the metal filing cabinet, holding her phone over one document after another. The camera angle did not reveal every page, but it showed the 2015 equipment lease lying open on the desk. She photographed it, returned it to the file, then opened the cabinet drawer containing trust summaries and property tax records. She never removed the originals. She only collected images. Watching my daughter move through my office with the patience of an auditor hurt more than watching her throw my belongings outside. Rage could explain a cruel sentence. It could not explain 27 minutes of organized copying. Marianne paused the video as Lauren leaned over the desk. This predates the medical evaluation, she said, and it may predate Evan's involvement. That possibility shifted our focus. I had assumed Evan designed the plan because he understood loans, signatures, and court procedures. Lauren worked in client relations and interior design, not finance. Yet the forged right of first refusal had been filed before Evan contacted the private physician, before the guardianship petition was drafted, and before he began leaving legal documents on the kitchen table. The sequence mattered. Someone first tried to create a claim against the land. Only afterward did someone begin building a case that I could no longer control it. Marianne laid the dates in a row. Pike's letter arrived. Lauren opened it. Lauren entered the yard. The fraudulent filing appeared. And then Evan started the medical paper trail. The property came first, she said. The incapacity strategy came second. I had been treating the guardianship attempt as the main scheme. It may have been a solution invented after the first scheme risked failure. Noah sent another message from school 2 days later. He had promised not to contact me secretly. So this one arrived through his counselor, who called Marianne first. Noah wanted to report something he believed adults should know. During an argument at home, he had heard Lauren tell Evan, "You only have to believe it was your idea until the papers are signed." When the counselor asked what they were discussing, Noah said he had heard the words land, trust, and Pike. He also remembered his mother speaking to an unknown man late at night from the backyard. She said, "My husband cannot know the full number yet." Marianne wrote everything down but warned me not to treat a 14-year-old's memory as proof. Children notice tone better than contracts. Still, the statement fit Graham's remark that Lauren had asked him not to contact Evan. My daughter was hiding something not only from me but from her husband. I asked Graham to meet again, this time at Marianne's office. He arrived with his corporate counsel and a printed chain of emails. He was not eager to expose a potential client, but he was more afraid of becoming involved in fraudulent title claims. The first message came from Lauren 3 days after Pike mailed the offer. She introduced herself as my daughter, an anticipated successor trustee. She wrote that I was struggling with decisions and had verbally authorized her to explore a sale. A week later, she told Graham the family would accept a structure based on a price of $3,800,000, provided part of the compensation could be paid as a consulting fee to an entity she would designate. The proposed fee was $900,000. Graham had refused to commit without title verification. But Lauren continued pressing. None of those emails included Evan. The most revealing message was sent from Lauren's personal account at 1:14 in the morning. She asked Graham to prepare 2 summaries, one showing a total property value of $2,600,000 for internal family review, and another reflecting the full amount for closing documents. Graham's counsel had rejected the request, warning that all material terms would need to be disclosed to the legal owner. Lauren replied that the difference concerned private family allocation and should not be misunderstood. I read the exchange twice. She had planned to tell Evan the land was worth $1.2 million less than Pike's actual offer. The $900,000 consulting fee would have gone to a company she controlled, leaving enough unexplained difference to cover costs and conceal the arrangement. Evan believed the land would rescue their household. Lauren was preparing to rescue herself. Marianne then searched state business filings and found Mercer Lane Consulting LLC, registered 6 weeks earlier using a private mailbox in Dublin. Lauren was the sole member. The name combined her maiden name with the street where Diane and I had lived when Lauren was born. It sounded sentimental, almost innocent. Its stated purpose was real estate consulting and asset transition services. Lauren had never worked in either field. The formation date came 5 days after her first communication with Graham. There was no business website, no clients, and no activity except a newly opened bank account. The structure did not prove theft, but it showed preparation. Lauren was not simply going along with Evan's panic. She had created a vehicle to receive money he did not know existed. The woman I had imagined as pressured and frightened was making plans beyond her husband's view. I did not feel vindicated by learning that Evan was not the only architect. I felt smaller. A father can direct his anger toward a son-in-law and still preserve one private belief. My daughter would not have done this without him. That belief collapsed in Marianne's conference room. Lauren had read the offer, photographed my records, created a company, requested split pricing, and arranged a discounted right of first refusal. Evan's role remained serious, but the first decisive acts were hers. I thought about every time I had explained her behavior by pointing to someone else, an impatient teacher, a selfish boyfriend, a demanding employer, a difficult husband. I had protected her from blame so consistently that perhaps she learned blame was always transferable. When Marianne asked whether I needed a break, I said no. I have taken enough breaks from seeing her clearly. That evening, alone in the cottage, I opened an old photo album Noah had rescued from Lauren's garage. In one picture, Lauren was 9 years old, standing beside a papier-mâché volcano at a school science fair. Diane had written on the back, "Walt missed it. Furnace accident." Lauren won second place. I remembered arriving home after midnight with a check large enough to cover payroll and a plastic necklace from an airport gift shop. Lauren accepted the necklace without looking at me. I had told myself she would understand someday. Instead, I taught her that absence could be compensated and hurt could be converted into property. None of that excused what she was doing, but it explained why she could look at my land and see payment owed. I had spent decades making money carry emotional weight it was never designed to hold. The independent cognitive evaluation took place in a medical office near Upper Arlington. Dr. Helen Morse asked me to remember word lists, draw a clock, explain investment risks, and describe the guardianship conflict in my own words. She did not flatter me or treat me like a victim. She challenged inconsistencies and asked why I had allowed my daughter account access for so long. I told her the truth after Diane died. I did not trust myself to open another envelope containing bad news. Lauren stepped in, and I never took the keys back. Dr. Morse's final report concluded that I possessed full capacity to manage personal, legal, and financial affairs. She noted normal age-related lapses but no evidence of dementia, delusion, or impaired judgment. Marianne instructed me not to send the report to Lauren's attorney yet. If they think we have nothing, they may keep moving, she said. We decided the safest way to expose the full plan was to let them believe pressure was working. I called Evan and said I was tired. I told him I would consider transferring limited authority if the family could resolve matters privately. His voice warmed immediately. That is all we have wanted, he said. I asked for one formal meeting with both attorneys present and a complete written proposal listing every asset they expected Lauren to manage. Evan agreed too quickly. Lauren called 10 minutes later. She sounded cautious rather than relieved. Why now? She asked. I said living alone at the yard had made me reconsider my future. That part was true. I do not want Noah remembering us at war, I added. Her silence softened. For 1 second, I heard the daughter who used to sit beside me in the truck and sing along to old country songs. Then she asked whether Pike had contacted me directly, and the softness vanished. Marianne began preparing an amendment to the trust that would remove Lauren from any future management role and place Noah's eventual education benefits under an independent trustee. Because of the threat of litigation, every step had to be deliberate. We also asked Graham to continue responding to Lauren without making promises or changing terms. He agreed to say only that Pike remained interested if proper authority could be demonstrated. Within days, Lauren sent him a message stating that a medical proceeding would soon confirm her control. She also asked whether the consulting fee could be wired immediately after signing rather than at closing. Graham replied that no payment could occur without a valid agreement executed by the owner or authorized fiduciary. Her response was short. That problem is being handled. Those 5 words revealed her confidence more clearly than any confession. We were preparing to sign the trust amendment on a Monday morning when 2 sheriff's deputies arrived at the cottage with a court order. They were polite, which made the papers no less destructive. Lauren and Evan had filed an emergency guardianship petition supported by affidavits from 2 neighbors, a private physician, and Lauren herself. The petition described me as confused, isolated, financially vulnerable, and unable to maintain safe living conditions. It requested temporary restrictions on major transfers until a hearing could be held. The judge had not declared me incompetent, but had ordered that the trust and certain accounts refrain from extraordinary transactions pending evaluation. I could pay ordinary expenses. I could not sell the property, amend beneficiary structures affecting major assets, or transfer large sums without further approval. The amendment on Marianne's desk became temporarily useless. The petition included photographs of the cottage taken from outside the fence. One showed peeling paint. Another framed me between 2 piles of rusted steel, making the active storage yard look like a dangerous junk field. A third showed prescription bottles on the kitchen counter without revealing they were current and properly labeled. Lauren's affidavit said I had become obsessed with scrap, suspicious of family, and prone to threatening financial retaliation. She described my refusal to sign the power of attorney as evidence I could no longer understand protective planning. Evan's affidavit added that I had driven while medicated and wandered the neighborhood after dark. The first claim referred to my trip home from therapy with a prescribed painkiller taken 6 hours earlier. The second referred to an evening walk around Lauren's block. Facts had not been invented. They had been stripped, sharpened, and arranged into a weapon. The temporary order froze enough access to make daily operations difficult. A contractor repairing the warehouse roof stopped work when payment could not be approved through the trust. My investment advisor suspended a scheduled transfer. The property insurer requested clarification after receiving notice of the guardianship case. Worse, the court appointed a visitor to inspect my living conditions, and Lauren arrived with the social worker as the inspection began. She wore a blue coat Diane had once given her and carried an expression of practiced sorrow. I hate that it came to this, she said. I answered, no, you hate that I noticed. The social worker looked between us. Lauren lowered her eyes, allowing my anger to fill the room more visibly than her betrayal. I understood too late that even a true sentence could be staged against me. Noah was temporarily barred from unsupervised contact with me while the court assessed family allegations. That restriction broke something in my composure. I could tolerate frozen accounts and public whispers. I could not tolerate my grandson believing I had vanished because I no longer cared. Marianne reminded me that violating the order would damage both of us. I followed it. That obedience felt like defeat. For 3 nights, I slept badly and began questioning whether the plan to wait had been wise. Lauren had moved first in court, shaped the record, and transformed my restraint into isolation. Perhaps I had spent my entire life overestimating what documents could repair after people had already chosen a story. Then the yard was entered again. I returned from a meeting with Marianne and found the warehouse side door hanging open. The new padlock had been cut cleanly. Inside the office, cabinet drawers stood open and papers covered the floor. The original business ledger documenting property improvements was gone. So was the backup hard drive containing archived camera footage. Whoever entered knew exactly what mattered. I called the police and touched nothing. On the desk, centered beneath the hanging lamp, lay a single sheet of cream stationery from Lauren's home office. Her handwriting was unmistakable. "Dad, you had a chance to keep this inside the family. Now other people will decide what happens to you." For 10 minutes, I believed she had won. The missing ledger supported ownership history and environmental compliance. The hard drive contained visual evidence of her unauthorized visits. The temporary order limited my ability to restructure assets, and the court file already portrayed me as paranoid. Then Marianne asked whether the camera system had uploaded before the drive was removed. I opened the cloud account and found the files intact. We had copied them after Noah's first message. Lauren had stolen the backup, not the evidence. Her note, however, revealed something even more useful. She believed the theft had blinded me. Marianne placed the paper in an evidence sleeve and looked at me across the ruined office. "Do not correct her assumption," she said. I understood. For the first time since the court order arrived, the balance shifted slightly. Lauren thought she had erased the path behind her. I would let her keep walking forward. By the next morning, Marianne had turned Lauren's note over to the police, the court-appointed visitor, and the forensic examiner handling the forged property document. We did not accuse Lauren of the break-in in public because we could not yet prove who cut the lock. Instead, we treated the theft as evidence preservation and allowed her to believe the missing hard drive had crippled us. That assumption became the center of our strategy. I called Lauren just after 10 and told her my strength was gone. "I do not want to spend the rest of my life fighting my own child," I said. The sentence was true, though not in the way she understood. She became quiet, then asked whether I was finally willing to discuss transferring control. I said I would consider limited authority if she arranged one formal meeting, returned my access to Noah, and promised the land would remain in the family. Her relief traveled through the phone like warmth. She thought I had surrendered. In reality, I had finally stopped trying to make her confess before she felt safe enough to expose herself. Lauren agreed to a meeting at Carl Benton's office, but only after Evan approved the terms. 2 hours later, he called me in the friendly voice he once used before asking for favors. "This is the responsible choice, Walt," he said. "Nobody wants to take anything from you." I almost admired the smoothness of the lie. He proposed that Lauren receive temporary management authority over the trust. While he handled communications with Pike and the banks, I told him Marianne would need a written inventory of every power they wanted. Evan hesitated. "That may feel more formal than necessary." I answered, "You filed a guardianship petition. We passed informal a long time ago." He recovered quickly and promised to prepare documents. Before ending the call, I mentioned that Pike might increase its offer if the property could be delivered without delay. Evan's breathing changed. "Increase it to what?" I said I had heard a figure near $4,400,000, but I was too tired to chase details. Silence followed. I had placed the bait exactly where greed and distrust met. The higher number was not invented. During our last conversation, Graham had said Pike could consider $4.4 million if environmental review remained clean and the Western Access parcel was included. It was not a guaranteed offer, but it was credible enough to matter. Marianne incorporated it into a draft settlement marked preliminary and confidential. then sent the document to Lauren's attorney. The draft stated that I might authorize a sale if all parties confirmed the history of negotiations, disclosed any side agreements, and acknowledged that I remained the legal owner. Lauren called within 30 minutes. "Why did you never tell me the offer increased?" she demanded. I said I had only recently learned. "Did Graham tell you directly?" she asked. I paused long enough to make her nervous. "Somebody did." She accused Pike of violating confidentiality, then caught herself and changed the subject. That reaction gave Marianne what she wanted. Lauren knew enough about the negotiations to fear disclosure, and she was more concerned about the price than about my supposed mental decline. Graham continued communicating with her under instructions from his counsel. He did not lie. He simply confirmed that Pike remained interested, and that any compensation arrangement would require valid authority. Lauren responded from her private account and demanded written assurance that Mercer Lane Consulting would receive $900,000 immediately after execution, not after closing. She also insisted that the total purchase price not appear in any summary sent to Evan before the family meeting. Graham forwarded the message to Marianne. We now had Lauren attempting to conceal both the fee and the full valuation after she knew the dispute had entered court. That did not erase Evan's role, but it clarified hers. Marianne said the strongest trap was one the other side built, while believing it was protecting itself. I had spent a career negotiating with men who revealed more when they thought I was desperate. Lauren was harder because I knew the child behind the calculation. Each new email felt less like evidence and more like the removal of another memory I had used to excuse her. The trap worked faster than we expected. Lauren used the home office computer to send one of her late-night messages. Assuming Evan was asleep, he found the open account the next morning. At Chasse Patruzeci, she shopte. He called me from his car and asked to meet without Lauren. His voice had lost its polish. We met in the far booth of a 24-hour diner where truck drivers drank coffee beneath fluorescent lights. Evan arrived unshaven. Wearing yesterday's shirt, he placed his phone on the table and showed me screenshots of Lauren's emails to Graham. She told me the offer was 2.6, he said. She said the rest was cleanup costs and taxes. I asked whether he was upset because she had lied or because she planned to keep the money. His face tightened. I did things because I thought we were saving the family. I reminded him that he had helped forge a claim against my land and build a false medical case. That was not saving anyone. I said, that was choosing who you were willing to bury. Evan offered to cooperate if I protected him from prosecution and allowed him enough money to settle his debts. I told him I could not promise either. He leaned across the table and whispered that Lauren had initiated the right of first refusal, selected the old signature, and told him to find someone willing to notarize it. He admitted contacting Ross Kessler and providing the paper without my presence. He also admitted sending distorted information to the private physician and drafting most of the guardianship petition. Lauren said once she controlled the trust, we would pay everything off and start over. He said. I believed her. I asked whether he had proof. He produced text messages, copies of drafts, and a voice memo Lauren had sent while angry. Marianne later reviewed them and confirmed they matched dates already in our timeline. Still, I refused a private bargain. Give everything to your lawyer. I said, then your lawyer gives it to Marianne. I am not making deals in a diner with the man who tried to have me declared helpless. Evan's fear turned to anger. He accused me of enjoying the power reversal. I did not. Satisfaction requires distance, and I was still too close to the damage. I told him the only useful thing he could do was tell the truth before Lauren told it for him. That warning proved accurate. By afternoon, Lauren discovered he had contacted me. She filed for legal separation and submitted a statement portraying herself as a financially abused wife manipulated into helping her husband control an elderly parent. Her statement claimed Evan handled every legal document, threatened to leave her with his debts, and used her access to my papers without explaining his purpose. She attached selected emails that made him appear commanding and omitted the messages showing her consulting company and hidden fee. Carl Benton sent the filing to Marianne with an offer Lauren would withdraw the guardianship petition if I agreed not to pursue civil claims against her. The speed of her repositioning stunned even Marianne. Lauren was not defending the plan anymore. She was preparing to survive it. Evan panicked when his attorney explained what Lauren had done. He withdrew his offer to cooperate and threatened to destroy his phone rather than let her use him as the sole criminal actor. Marianne warned his attorney that deletion after notice could create additional consequences. For 2 days, our plan appeared to unravel. We needed Evan present at the final meeting because Lauren's strategy depended on blaming him in his absence. Without him, she could tell a cleaner story. Graham was becoming nervous about remaining involved. The court visitor had not yet completed her report. My accounts remained partly restricted. Then Noah disappeared from Lauren's house on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. At first, I knew nothing. I was replacing a broken window latch in the cottage when someone knocked on the door. Noah stood outside, soaked through, carrying a backpack and breathing hard. He had taken a city bus south, then walked nearly 2 miles from the last stop. Every instinct in me said to bring him inside, dry his clothes, and lock the gate. Instead, I called 911 before touching his backpack. I told the dispatcher my grandson had arrived voluntarily, that there was a court restriction on unsupervised contact, and that I wanted an officer and child services present. Noah stared at me as if I had rejected him. "You are sending me back?" he asked. I knelt carefully, my repaired knee protesting. "I am making sure nobody can say I hid you," I said. I gave him a blanket and kept the cottage door open while we waited. He said Lauren and Evan had been screaming about money, prison, and who would blame whom. Lauren had ordered him to delete his messages to me and sign a letter saying I made him afraid. When he refused, she took his phone and said he was too young to understand what was at stake. "I understand they want me to lie," he said. That sentence sounded older than 14. The police officer arrived with a county caseworker. I did not question Noah about evidence or ask him to repeat details for my benefit. I told him to speak honestly to the adults assigned to protect him. The caseworker interviewed him privately inside the scale house while I stood outside beneath the awning. Lauren arrived 40 minutes later, with Carl Benton and a face twisted between fear and fury. She rushed toward Noah, then stopped when the officer raised a hand. "You brought him here," she accused me. I said the gate records, bus cameras, and my call to emergency services would show otherwise. For once, she had no prepared answer. Noah returned home that evening under a temporary safety plan. But the court-appointed guardian for his interests opened a separate review. 3 days later, the guardian reported that Noah did not fear me and had been pressured by both parents to support claims he believed were false. The finding did not decide the property case, but it destroyed one of Lauren's most emotionally powerful allegations. Noah's arrival changed me more than it changed the legal strategy. I could have used his fear as a weapon. I could have recorded him, pushed him for names and dates, or kept him long enough to make Lauren panic. A younger version of me might have called that practical. Instead, I protected the process because the child mattered more than winning. Marianne noticed. "You finally stopped trying to solve family pain like a business emergency," she said. I told her not to sound so pleased. She smiled and returned to work. She petitioned for a consolidated mediation before the guardianship hearing, with all counsel present, along with Graham, the trustee, Dr. Morse, and the child's guardian. We framed the meeting as a final attempt to avoid a destructive public proceeding. Carl Benton accepted because Lauren still believed a settlement could give her control of the land. Evan's attorney accepted because he feared Lauren's version would become permanent if he stayed away. To draw everyone into one room, I sent a formal notice stating that I was willing to consider the Pike transaction if the parties signed a complete acknowledgement of ownership, authority, negotiations, and compensation. The notice required Lauren and Evan to identify every agreement they believed entitled them to act. It also requested that Pike bring its current purchase draft. Lauren interpreted this as surrender wrapped in paperwork. She sent me a message saying, "I knew you would eventually choose family over pride." I did not answer. Marianne assembled the evidence in 3 sections. The first contained the gate logs, cloud camera footage, and records showing Lauren's unauthorized visits. The second contained the Pike emails, the hidden pricing request, and the formation of Mercer Lane Consulting. The third contained the forged right of first refusal, the examiner's report, Evan's communications with the physician, and Dr. Morse's independent capacity evaluation. Nothing was new. The power came from seeing all of it together. Evan nearly ruined the meeting the night before it began. His attorney informed Marianne that he planned to remain silent and invoke his rights regarding the forged filing. Lauren had offered him a private divorce arrangement if he accepted primary responsibility and kept her consulting company out of the dispute. Marianne could not force him to testify during mediation. We adjusted. Instead of relying on Evan's cooperation, we would use authenticated messages already produced through counsel and let his silence compete with Lauren's denials. Graham agreed to confirm the emails directly. Dr. Morse would address capacity. The forensic examiner would explain the copied signature. The guardian would speak to Noah's statements. Evan could refuse to help us, but he could no longer remove what he had already created. A trap should never require the trapped person to behave nobly. Marianne said, it should only require them to behave like themselves. The mediation took place in a glass-walled conference room on the 8th floor of Carl Benton's office. Lauren arrived first in a white suit, carrying a leather folder and wearing Diane's pearl earrings. For a moment, seeing those earrings nearly broke my concentration. Evan entered 12 minutes late with his own attorney and did not look at his wife. Graham sat beside corporate counsel with the Pike draft sealed in a blue binder. Dr. Morse and the independent trustee took seats near Marianne. The child's guardian joined by video. Lauren positioned a stack of papers before her and whispered to Carl that Evan had coerced her into every questionable act. Evan heard and laughed without humor. The mediator warned everyone that the purpose was resolution, not performance. I placed my old steel document box on the table. Its dented latch still carried a brown stain from the mud outside Lauren's house. Lauren looked at the box, then at me. Her expression softened into the same practiced concern she had used before the social worker. Dad, she said, we can still end this without destroying each other. She slid the proposed management agreement across the table. It gave her authority over the trust, the Grove City property, and negotiations with Pike while promising me a monthly allowance and continued use of the cottage. You will be secure, she said. No more stress. No more legal bills. No more living alone in unsafe conditions. Evan stared at the document as if seeing some of its terms for the first time. Graham opened his binder but did not remove the contract. Lauren placed a pen beside my hand. You only need to sign one final time, she said, and then all of us can live normally again. I lifted the lid of the battered box and removed the opened Pike envelope she had thrown into the rain. Then I placed it between us and said, before I sign anything, I want you to explain why this letter was already open. Lauren looked at the opened envelope for 3 full seconds before touching it. Then she leaned back and gave a small, wounded laugh. Dad, I handled your mail while you were recovering. You asked me to. Her answer was prepared, but not complete. I asked why the first page had disappeared and why she had brought Graham Pike onto my property before telling me about the offer. Carl Benton began to object, saying mediation was not a trial. But the mediator raised one hand and reminded him that factual clarity was necessary for settlement. Lauren glanced toward Graham. He opened the blue binder and placed a printed email chain on the table. The first message showed her introducing herself as my anticipated successor trustee. The second requested that Pike avoid contacting me because my judgment was declining. The third asked for 2 different price summaries. I watched Evan read over his attorney's shoulder. His face changed when he reached the hidden consulting fee. $900,000, he said. Lauren did not look at him. She recovered quickly. That was not a secret payment, she said. It was compensation for the work I was doing to organize the property transition. Graham's corporate counsel asked what professional services she had provided. Lauren answered that she had coordinated family communication, gathered records, and introduced the opportunity. Graham replied that Pike had contacted the legal owner directly by mail and that Lauren had opened the correspondence before asserting authority she did not possess. Marianne then produced the state filing for Mercer Lane Consulting, LLC, registered 5 days after Lauren's first email to Pike. The company had no previous clients, no employees, and no operating history. Its bank account listed Lauren as the sole authorized signer. Evan pushed his chair away from the table. You told me Pike offered $2.6 million, he said. Lauren turned toward him with sudden anger. Because you would have gambled away the rest before closing. The statement escaped before Carl could stop her. It was not a confession to everything, but it destroyed her claim that Evan alone controlled the scheme. The mediator asked each party to slow down. Marianne did the opposite. Not with volume, but with sequence. She displayed the timeline we had built Pike's letter delivered to Lauren's house. Lauren's first email, her visit to my warehouse, the formation of Mercer Lane Consulting, the filing of the discounted right of first refusal, and only afterward the first documented attempt to arrange my cognitive evaluation. The incapacity narrative did not lead to the property plan. Marianne said, the property plan led to the incapacity narrative. Carl argued that Lauren had acted from concern after observing genuine lapses. Dr. Morse opened her report and summarized my evaluation. She stated that I demonstrated full understanding of assets, consequences, legal relationships, and risk. I had ordinary age-related forgetfulness, not cognitive impairment. The private physician who supported the emergency petition had never examined me in person. His concerns came from information supplied by Evan. Marianne placed those messages beside the report. Ordinary incidents had been edited into a diagnosis. Evan's attorney objected when Marianne introduced his texts to Ross Kessler, the notary. The mediator reminded him that the documents had already been produced voluntarily during settlement discussions. One message asked Ross whether he could notarize a family land agreement without dragging the old man downtown. Another included the scanned signature from my 2015 equipment lease. Evan closed his eyes while Marianne explained that the forensic examiner had matched the forged signature to that exact contract, including a microscopic printing defect from the scan. Lauren immediately said, "That was Evan. I never spoke to Ross." Marianne nodded and placed the warehouse footage on the conference screen. It showed Lauren photographing the 2015 lease and property files before Evan contacted the notary. The room went quiet as my daughter's image moved across the screen, opening drawers, arranging pages beneath her phone, and returning every document to its place. She had been careful. She had not been careful enough. Lauren said the video proved only that she was organizing records for me. I asked why she entered after hours without telling me, and why she later stole the same category of evidence. Her eyes flashed. "I did not break into your warehouse." I had not accused her directly. Marianne removed the cream stationery note from an evidence sleeve and placed it beside the envelope. "Dad, you had a chance to keep this inside the family. Now other people will decide what happens to you." Carl's face tightened. Lauren insisted the message referred to the court petition, not the theft. Marianne agreed that the note alone did not identify who cut the lock. Then she explained that the stolen hard drive was only a local backup. The camera files had already uploaded to 2 cloud accounts. Lauren stared at me, and I saw the exact moment she understood that taking the drive had not erased the footage. Her confidence did not collapse dramatically. It drained through the small muscles around her mouth. The cloud recordings showed more than her visits with Graham. One clip captured Evan entering the office 2 nights before the fraudulent filing. Another showed Lauren returning alone the following week and photographing the cabinet where trust summaries were stored. Gate records confirmed both used personal codes. The evidence did not prove who physically removed the ledger and hard drive, but it proved an organized pattern of unauthorized access. Graham then authenticated the complete email chain. He explained that Lauren had requested a false internal summary showing a purchase price of $2.6 million, while the actual preliminary offer remained $3.8 million. Later, after learning Pike might consider $4.4 million under certain conditions, she demanded the consulting fee be paid immediately upon signing. We rejected every request that depended on concealing material terms. Graham said, no valid purchase agreement was ever executed. The deal Lauren thought she had controlled had never legally existed. Evan finally spoke without consulting his lawyer. "She said the land would save us," he said. "She said Walt had promised it to her and was too stubborn to admit he was slipping." Lauren laughed harshly. "You needed saving long before I found that letter." The mediator told them to address the table, not each other. Evan admitted his investments had created approximately $185,000 in personal debt. He had hidden margin calls, borrowed against commissions, and used credit lines to cover household expenses. Lauren discovered the debt and threatened divorce. According to Evan, she then showed him Pike's offer and proposed transferring control of my property. He agreed to obtain the notary and build the incapacity case because he believed the sale would preserve their marriage and home. I knew it was wrong. He said, I told myself Walt would still have more money than he could spend. That sentence explained him better than any apology could. Lauren called him a liar and produced emails in which he pressured her to act quickly. Marianne acknowledged those messages. Evan was not innocent, and nobody in the room suggested otherwise. Then the child's guardian appeared on the screen and summarized her interviews with Noah. She did not disclose unnecessary private details. She stated that Noah consistently described a loving relationship with me, denied fearing me, and reported being pressured by both parents to repeat claims he believed were untrue. Lauren's expression changed more at Noah's name than at the financial evidence. He is a child, she said. He misunderstood adult conversations. The guardian replied that children could misunderstand contracts, but they understood when adults told them what to say. She also confirmed that Noah had gone to the yard because he felt trapped between his parents' competing stories. My daughter lowered her eyes. For the first time, she looked ashamed rather than cornered. Marianne then turned to the guardianship petition. With Dr. Morse's report, the authenticated emails, the manipulated incident timeline, and the guardian's findings, Lauren's attorney could no longer maintain that the emergency filing rested on neutral concern. Carl requested a private recess. The mediator granted 15 minutes. Lauren and Carl left the room. Evan stayed with his lawyer, staring at the tabletop. Graham closed his binder. I walked to the window and looked down at Columbus traffic moving between buildings. Marianne joined me and asked whether I was ready for the next part. I knew what she meant. Exposing the scheme was only half the confrontation. The more difficult decision concerned what I would do with the power I had recovered. For months, I had imagined Lauren finally understanding that I could take the house, sell the land, and leave her with nothing. Standing there, I realized destruction would be another way of letting money speak for me. When Lauren returned, the white suit no longer looked like armor. Carl announced that she would withdraw her request for guardianship if all parties entered a confidential settlement and waived civil claims. Marianne said withdrawal was not a concession because the evidence would likely defeat the petition anyway. She also stated that the fraudulent right of first refusal had to be released immediately, corrected in the county record, and accompanied by sworn statements identifying everyone involved. Evan's attorney agreed in principle but requested protection from additional private lawsuits. I said I would not promise immunity from consequences outside my control. Ross Kessler's conduct and the false court submissions could be reviewed by authorities regardless of my preference. However, I was willing to limit my own civil claims if the trust, the property title, and the false guardianship record were fully repaired. Lauren looked at me as though she had expected anger to be easier to negotiate than restraint. Then Marianne opened the mortgage file for Lauren's house. She explained that the Mercer Family Trust still held a properly recorded $310,000 secured loan. Lauren and Evan had missed payments, concealed additional liens, and attempted to use the house in refinancing discussions without the trust's required consent. Those actions triggered default provisions. Evan whispered something to his lawyer. Lauren stared directly at me. You said that money was from Mom, she said. I said it was meant to help you build a life. I answered. I did not say you could erase the paperwork when it became inconvenient. She accused me of hiding behind technicalities. I reminded her that she had relied on forged technicalities to claim my land. The difference was that my documents were real, signed, and recorded with her knowledge. I did not demand immediate foreclosure. Instead, I offered two choices. Lauren and Evan could refinance within 6 months and repay the trust in full. Or they could sell the house under supervised terms, satisfy the loan, and divide whatever equity remained according to their divorce proceedings. The recovered money would not return to my personal spending account. It would fund an independently managed education trust for Noah, inaccessible to either parent. Lauren's face tightened when she realized she would not control the proceeds even if I showed leniency. You are taking my son away from me financially, she said. I answered, I am taking him out of the reach of this fight. The mediator asked whether I would extend the deadline if refinancing proved difficult. I agreed to consider a short extension based on documented good faith. But I would no longer accept promises unsupported by records. Graham asked whether I still intended to sell the Grove City property. Lauren looked toward him before I answered. Not today, I said. I had spent weeks thinking the land's highest value was the size of Pike's check. But the property had become the object everyone used to justify betrayal, fear, and entitlement. I refused to let the final decision be made in the same room where they tried to strip me of authority. Pike could submit a clean proposal through Marianne after the title was cleared. Graham accepted that without argument. Lauren did not. You are throwing away $4 million to punish me, she said. I told her postponing a sale was not punishment. It was ownership. For years, I had allowed her to confuse access with entitlement. That ended at the conference table. The settlement took nearly 7 hours to draft. Lauren withdrew the guardianship petition and corrected the false statements she had made regarding my capacity. Evan provided the original message history, identified Ross's role, and acknowledged supplying misleading information to the physician. Both released any claim to manage the trust or negotiate the Grove City land. The fraudulent right of first refusal would be formally discharged. Neither parent could access Noah's education trust. My civil claims would be limited to documented losses, legal costs, property damage, and restoration of the trust, provided they cooperated completely. The agreement did not erase potential professional or legal consequences arising from fraud, false notarization, or court filings. I did not ask for public humiliation. I asked for an accurate record. Their reputations would be shaped by what they had done, not by a campaign from me. Within weeks, the emergency restrictions on my accounts were lifted. The court accepted the withdrawal and Dr. Morse's evaluation. The insurance company restored normal coverage after reviewing the property inspection. The warehouse roof was repaired before winter. The county removed Lauren's false purchase claim from the title record. Ross Kessler surrendered his notary commission while the matter was reviewed. Evan's employer suspended him after learning he had used professional contacts in a fraudulent family transaction. Lauren's company terminated her when Pike disclosed that she had represented herself as an authorized asset manager while using her business position to support the approach. Neither lost everything overnight. Consequences came in slower, less cinematic forms: legal invoices, closed doors, damaged credibility, and the long silence after people stopped believing their explanations. Lauren and Evan listed the house in January. Their marriage did not survive the process. Evan moved into a rented apartment near his office while Lauren remained in the house with Noah until closing. After the mortgage, trust loan, selling costs, and other debts were paid, little equity remained. It was not poverty, but it was far from the wealthy new beginning they had imagined. Evan began making structured payments toward the remaining losses and cooperated with investigators. He never offered me an apology without also explaining why he had felt desperate. I eventually stopped expecting better from him. Desperation can explain the road a person takes. It does not walk the road for them. Lauren came to the yard on a cold Sunday afternoon after the house went under contract. She parked outside the gate because her code no longer worked. I met her near the scale house. She wore jeans, an old coat, and no makeup. Without the white rooms and careful clothing, she looked more like the girl in the science fair photograph. She said she had nowhere else to ask for help. Then she knelt on the cracked pavement and began crying. Please, she said, stop the sale. Let me refinance through the trust. I will sign anything. I will do whatever you want. Evan arrived 20 minutes later with 2 relatives who had once urged me to accept assisted living. They all asked me to keep matters private, restore the old loan terms, and give the family another chance. For a moment, the scene resembled the revenge I had imagined the people who had dismissed me now asking from below. I felt no pleasure in it. I asked Lauren to stand because I did not need her on her knees. You think this is about making you beg? I said. It is about making your promises stop replacing consequences. She said I owed her some mercy because I had admitted failing her as a father. I told her I was sorry for the performances I missed. The nights Diane ate alone, and every time I handed Lauren money instead of giving her my attention. But my regret is not a deed to my property. I said, it does not authorize you to forge my name. Use your son, or tell a court I cannot think for myself. Evan asked whether I wanted them homeless. I said no, which was why I had given them 6 months and allowed a normal sale. Mercy did not require pretending the debt never existed. I agreed not to pursue additional personal damages beyond the settlement if both continued cooperating and corrected every false statement made to relatives, employers, doctors, and the court. I also required family counseling before Lauren could rebuild unrestricted contact with Noah after the custody review. Those terms were not tools to control her life. They were boundaries around mine. Lauren asked whether I would ever trust her again. I answered honestly, not because you ask me to, maybe because of what you do over time. She cried harder at that than she had when discussing the house. A guaranteed inheritance would have been easier for her than uncertain forgiveness. In March, I signed a long-term lease with Pike for the western portion of the property instead of selling all 11 acres. The company gained rail access and built a logistics transfer facility on land I no longer used. I kept the warehouse, the cottage, and the 2 maple trees Diane had planted. The lease produced steady income without surrendering the entire place. Part of that income funded environmental cleanup and a vocational scholarship for local students interested in industrial trades. Noah's Education Trust received regular contributions through an independent trustee. Lauren could see annual statements but could not direct a dollar. The arrangement gave her son opportunity without turning him into another person who mistook love for unrestricted access. Noah returned to the yard on supervised weekends after the family court completed its review. The first project we chose was Diane's old 1978 Ford pickup, which had sat beneath a tarp behind the warehouse for 16 years. Its paint had faded to dull blue. The engine was seized, and mice had nested in the glove compartment. Noah opened the hood and said, "Mom would call this trash." I handed him a flashlight. "Your mother has been wrong about trash before." We worked slowly, cleaning one component at a time. I did not speak to him about the legal case unless he asked. He needed a grandfather, not another attorney. By summer, the engine turned over. The first rough burst of sound filled the warehouse, and Noah laughed so loudly that I heard Diane in it. Lauren and I began meeting once a month at a diner halfway between her apartment and the yard. She had found a less glamorous job managing accounts for a building supply company. At first, every conversation circled blame. Then, gradually, she began discussing what she had done without beginning every sentence with Evan. Debt, or childhood. I did not give her a key. I did not restore account access. I did not name her as trustee. We drank coffee, talked about Noah, and left separately. That was not reconciliation in the way movies sell it. It was something narrower and more honest. A door open only as far as earned trust allowed. One evening, I stood outside the warehouse while the setting sun turned piles of sorted steel orange and gold. Lauren's sentence returned to me, "You belong in the trash." For most of my life, I had known that discarded things were not always worthless. Sometimes they were damaged. Sometimes they had been misused. Sometimes the cost of restoration exceeded their value. And sometimes, with patience and the right limits, they could serve a new purpose without pretending they had never been broken. I could not restore my family to what it had been because much of what I remembered had never truly existed. I had confused providing with parenting, silence with peace, and forgiveness with unlimited entry. I kept the land. I protected Noah. I recovered control of my name, my accounts, and my future. But the most important thing I reclaimed was the right to love my daughter without surrendering myself to her. She might change. She might not. That choice belonged to her. My choice was simpler. I would no longer pay people to stay, excuse them so they would not leave, or hand them authority because boundaries felt unkind. The house I helped Lauren buy was gone. The family gatherings became smaller. Some relatives never apologized for believing the worst about me. Those were real losses. Victory did not erase them. It only meant the losses were no longer deciding who I had to become. The next Saturday, Noah and I rolled Diane's restored truck into the sunlight. The blue paint was still imperfect, and I had left one small dent in the passenger door because Diane used to joke that it was the only part of the vehicle she had personally redesigned. Noah climbed into the driver's seat while I stood beside the open window. He asked whether we should take it past his mother's new apartment. I shook my head. Not today. I said, today we drive somewhere because we choose to go, not because we need somebody to see us. He smiled, turned the key, and the old engine settled into a steady rhythm. Behind us, the yard was still full of metal other people had thrown away. Ahead of us, the gate stood open.